Now, it's very popular in Lagos for you to see some locations, particularly around the Ikeja GRA, around Festac, some part of Surulere too, some part of Bagada, and some part of Ilupeju. And what you are going to see on them is Federal C of O. So, in this episode of Meet the Property Guy, we'll do some simple analogy of the difference between Federal C of O and State C of O. So, which means that two lands can have certificate of occupancy, and one of them can be issued by the federal government, and another one issued by the state government. So, what are the implications? What are the interpretations of Federal C of O and the State C of O? Like actually, most common C of O are State C of O. Federal C of O, particularly in Lagos, is pretty rare, but if you are an avid investor, there are cases where you are going to come across these, particularly around the Lagos mainland. All right, so in case you are coming across a video like this for the first time, this Meet the Property channel, and this will discuss everything in real estate, from the land documents, land titles, risk assessments, portfolio management, analyzing location, analyzing risk, analyzing the different frauds that you can come across when you are investing in Nigeria, when you are investing in Lagos, or even the other popular cities around Nigeria like Abuja, Ibadan, Portharcourt, and the like. So, after watching this particular educative guide, I would suggest you go to our playlist. We have a playlist on C of O. So, I have several videos I've done regarding the C of O. And then I have a playlist on land documents. Generally, I have a playlist on hierarchy of property titles, and so many other playlists like that. And we have different episodes and different topics that we have covered under those playlists. So that playlist is definitely going to help you a lot. All right. So let's go straight into the video. Federal C of O versus State C of O. What are the differences and what are the interpretations of these title documents? All right. So generally, a C of O is a C of O, certificate of occupancy. But the major difference between a Federal C of O and a State C of O is the body that is issuing the certificates. So which means that the Federal C of O is issued by the federal government on what we call federal lands. And then the State C of O is issued by the state government on what we call state lands. All right. Now, I'm very familiar with Lagos, so I'm going to keep most of my examples with Lagos. But this same federal and state land also applies in every other state. Enugu, Portharcourt, Ogun State, Oyo, Abuja, and the likes. Abuja is even federal, so there is no state, because Abuja is federal capital territory. So you are going to be seeing something like FCDA C of O in Abuja, very common. So in Lagos, I'm going to keep most of the examples to Lagos, actually. And there have been several court disputes and legal disputes regarding which land should be a federal land and which land should belong to the state government. And in Lagos particularly, these have created a lot of double taxation, where both the states and the federal government are going to be taxing residents or taxing property owners for a land, because the federal government are claiming that it's their land, and the state is also still claiming that as long as that land still falls under their state, is their land. All right. So now, for Federal C of O, we have different locations in each state in Nigeria that are controlled by the federal government. Now, like I said, I'm going to be keeping most of my examples for Lagos. Recently, when the coastal road construction started, and there were disputes, particularly when it affected landmark beach, the federal minister of works started explaining about how some certain setback from the ocean belongs to the federal government. So either you like it or not, in your states, there are some portion and some specific areas in your states that still falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government. Anything around the coastal line, so that means any land close to the beach, it still falls under the federal government jurisdiction. So, and that's why if any state want to build a port, there's still a seaport, for example, they still have to get some licenses and some approvals from the federal government. And then the same thing with any state that want to build an airport too, they still have to also obtain some approvals and some licenses with the federal government. And the same thing also for states that want to build a rail line, or they want to use the federal government rail line. So at least for most states, Lagos, Ibadan, Ogun State, there's a federal rail line that passes through these states. So all these land and setback areas around this rail line also still falls under the federal government. So for any of this portion that falls under the control of the federal government, any title and certification regarding that land will be under the federal government also. That's when the federal government now starts issuing C of O for whoever they allocate any portion to for that place. Now, there's also what we call federal housing authority, FHA. Yeah, FHA. So there's FHA estate in Ikorodu. There's federal housing estate in Ikorodu. There's FHA estate in somewhere around Ikeja. Also, there's FHA estate around Ikeja. There's FHA estates, Festac. Festac is also under federal housing authority too. So all this location that is under federal housing also, the certification and the title that is obtainable on those land and on those property is also federal C of O. And it's still the federal government that is also issuing this certification. Now, some part of Ikoyi is also federal C of O. Most part of Ikeja GRA is also federal C of O. And there's also some portion around Ojodu, around Ilupeju, around Surulere also, that is also under federal C of O. Now, state C of O is more common because apart from few spots and few locations in a state that is under the federal government, the majority of the land in a state, either is the urban area or the rural area, falls under the state government. So it's the state government that will now be issuing state C of O for those ones, really. Now, apart from places that fall under federal housing, I mentioned that anywhere around the coastline, along the Atlantic Ocean, regardless of the state, either is around the Atlantic Ocean, falling under Lagos, falling under Ogun State, falling under River State, falling under Bayelsa, falling under Ondo, falling under which other state again? I think Calabar to have Cross River also has a Atlantic Ocean line too. I think Akwa Ibom also has a Atlantic Ocean coastline too. So all this portion that falls around that coastline, so there's a debate if it's 200 meter, 500 meter, or 1 kilometer. So it's also under the federal government too. So if anybody approach the federal government and pay the federal government, what the federal government is going to give that person is also a federal C of O. The state government, to an extent, does not control the coastline. Now, apart from the coastline, there are also portion that are like around the waterways in the states. Also, all these portions are also mostly controlled by the federal government too. So all these portions controlled under the federal government, either the rail line, the federal rail line, the coastline. In every state also there are interstates, all these interstate roads like Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Lagos to Calabar, the Lagos to Calabar coastal way also is also like a federal government project, and any other major federal government project like that too. The federal government too might also talk to the states and take some portion there and issue federal C of O for whoever they allocate those portions to. Right. So land that is under the federal government's jurisdiction have the federal C of O, and then land under the states. For Abuja majorly, because Abuja is the federal capital territory. So what you are going to be seeing in Abuja mostly is FCDA FCDA C of O. FCDA C of O, FCDA C of O, FCDA C of O. So because in Abuja there is FCDA, there is area council. So to be very frank, I'm not really the best person you should be talking to about Abuja real estate, because even me myself, there are so many things about Abuja real estate I don't understand. So maybe I will have to find one of my colleagues to do that. Find it, one of my colleagues, and then dissect the Abuja real estate. We're talking about area council, FCDA, and all those, their jargon, RFO, and all those jargon. But this is very, very popular too in Abuja, FCDA, because Abuja is federal capital territory. So most land in Abuja is controlled by the federal government. All right. So, so any place that you are buying the property, if it's a federal housing scheme, you are under federal C of O. If it's a state housing scheme, then you are under the state C of O or the state allocation, or apart from the allocation, they also use one particular, maybe confirmation or something. So all those ones is under the states. And why I'm doing this difference is there was one recent publication by one of the ministers. I can't remember which exact minister, where they were talking about ground rents. So the ground rents they were talking about, because it's federal, is on federal C of O properties. So if your property is not in Abuja and your property does not fall under any of the federal land, you are exempted from that their own levy. So the states themselves charge their own levies for their own C of O. But in Lagos, I've seen the case very well. States will still charge you levy for a federal C of O. So you pay federal government and still pays the state, particularly in Lagos. So, but generally, the federal governments, they are the one that issue levy for federal land, and states issue levy for state lands. Generally. So every C of O comes with a ground rent. Ground rent. Every C of O. Even if you read a C of O copy, when you go to the document, you are going to see it where they mention it as part of the terms of the C of O, that there's a ground rent that you are going to be paying every year. There's a development levy, a one-time development levy that you are going to pay. So the ground rent is more of like a tax, just that a lot of people don't pay it. And if you don't pay it, it's fine. The government that are compiling it for you. When you sell that property and the new person wants to apply for governor's consent, they're going to calculate all the arrears, all the outstanding ground rents the person have owe. And the new person that wants to pay for that governor's consent must pay it. So that's ground rent. So both state C of O and federal C of O, they charge ground rent. So it's not a new thing at all. So I've seen a couple of content guys start taking that. They're charging you rent on top of your land. So it has been there since the land decree, since the 80s that we did the land decree. Ground rent have been in every C of O. So it's not new at all. So the federal government charge the ground rent for their own land. The states charge the ground rent on their own land, as long as that land has a C of O. So it's part of the property tax and property levy that the government that they charge, and also like a source of revenue for the government. So that's pretty the difference between these two: federal C of O, state C of O. So if there is a property that you want to buy and they tell you, okay, what's on the property is a federal C of O. So that's just for you to understand that that land is on the federal land, and the institution and the authority that is in charge of that property is a federal government body. So, but if it's a state C of O, that means the land bureau in the state capital, are the one in charge of that particular land. So if a land is under federal C of O, you don't have anything to do at Alausa, frankly. Everything that you are going to be doing with that land is at FHA, that's a Federal Housing Authority office. Either I think they should have an office in Lagos, or you go to Abuja, basically, for federal C of O. I think it's Abuja you have to go for anything federal C of O. Either you want to do perfection or whatever you want to do with it. All right, so that's the difference. There was also one article I was reading sometime, I think maybe 2 months ago, and there was some place, I think in Enugu, and the federal government allocated some portion there to some people, and the state government came and demolished some of those portions and said that the federal government have allocated more than their own portion. So these federal government and state government allocations, they always have their disputes regarding how many space do you have, how many space you don't have, and all those. So I think you might have to engage a lawyer when it comes to federal allocation, just to be sure that it's not part of the sports that is in dispute with the state. All right, so if you have questions regarding these, you can drop a comment. My comment is always open. I'm going to attend to that. And my Instagram page is always on the screen, installmenthomes.ng. So you can always visit our installment homes ng. We have deals, opportunities there constantly, where you can see what we have for cash flow, for land banking, for hostels, for shortlets, and so many other opportunities like that. So I also suggest you visit our installment homes ng IG page. That's our listing page, so you can see all the different opportunities that you have available. And in addition, also, PropTech is also ongoing, and we are open to pre-seed funding, seed funding, and partnership regarding what we are building there. So if you want to know more about that, also you can reach out to me directly for that. All right. So I think you're the normal property on the planet, your property advisor, property consultant. My name is Rabi Mustafa. Thanks for watching our videos. Thanks for always coming to our channel. Thanks for always engaging on our content. We appreciate you guys so much, and see you next time.